prick of a finger. Chapter 4. When Turner reached Hamilton, he wasted no time getting his father and mother. They were both waiting for him with the royal carriage packed for their trip to Avani so they could meet the princess. He touched the ground with his Pegasus and ran to them. "Father, we have to go now. Up to Terranil. There's this girl that needs our help. She was captured by 2 dragons and taken to this castle shrouded by darkness at Dragon's Perch." The King of Hamilton hushed the boy. "Hold it there. Who is this girl?" "Paige. I met her on my journey. Son, I will send word to Terranil to get the girl. For now, you need to be presented to the princess. It is not in our territory, and therefore none of our concern. Even Avani would not have the authority to dispatch knights to the skies." "We must be going off," the king said, getting into the carriage. "You were supposed to be here yesterday." "Father, please. We must go now with our knights." "Son, if I did that, what would Terranil think? They would assume I was leading an assault. Besides, we don't have that many Pegasuses. Terranil is better equipped to handle the situation." Frustrated, Turner turned in a circle while running his hands through his dark hair. Facing his father, he proclaimed, "Then I'll go alone after all. I'm not going to let her die." He dashed right back to his Pegasus and took to the sky. Turner's mother closed her eyes in contemplation while his father yelled. The queen pressed a finger to her husband's lips as she stepped inside the carriage. She ordered the coachman to go on ahead. "What? Why are you so calm right now?" the king demanded. "Our son just sped off to Dragon's Perch and disrespected his duties." "Our boy is in love, dear. There wasn't anything we could say to stop him from going after this girl. How is he supposed to swear his heart to the princess when it's distracted?" "In love? That's an outrage. He was gone for 3 days." The queen stared out the window. "Why don't you pray for his safety and send out that message to Terranil?" The king huffed but did as his wife commanded. He wasn't happy, but he'd rather not have his son die because of stubbornness. Paige woke in a grimy dungeon cell. Attached to the only solid wall in the room by 2 chains was a stiff board. She could only assume it was meant to be a bed. Also in the room was a large spinning wheel. She walked over to it, puzzled by what its purpose was, for she had not laid eyes on one since she was a baby. She spun the wheel with curiosity, and then a voice said, "I've finally found you, after all these years." "I knew I would though. It's destiny." Paige looked around the cell until she spotted Fashion on the other side of the bars. The shadow fairy came forward, her long black dress dragging along the ground. Her wings extended out like a dark fog. "What do you mean?" Paige asked. Fashion laughed. "Of course, they didn't tell you. My girl, you are a princess. A princess who has been cursed. You're the princess of Avani. You're the one people call Princess Beauty." Paige laughed. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. I live in Terranil." "Yes, and let me guess, your parents said you were dropped off on their doorstep? Have you not heard that no one has seen this princess? I wonder why. Perhaps it's because she's not in the castle." That's absurd. Please, I live a simple life. My name is Paige, and I am not a princess." Fashion smiled. "All right then, be in denial, but once you fall over and sleep for eternity, don't say I didn't warn you. Yes, your fairy friends may have eased your suffering, but I think they increased it by giving your parents hope. I'll leave you to it then. It's been a while since you've seen one of these. Spindles aren't usually this sharp, so be careful not to prick your finger." Then Fashion walked to the shadows and disappeared. Paige was left utterly confused and wondering if what the fairy said was true. She had a hard time believing it was. Her eyes looked at the spindle on the spinning wheel. Whether she believed or not, she didn't want to find out by fulfilling a curse. Remembering she had the dagger in her boot, she pulled it out and went to the barred door. First, she tried kicking it, but that didn't do much. She took the dagger and slid it down the empty space until it hit the latch which connected the door to the rest of the bars. She didn't have enough strength to break the latch with the dagger. Instead of trying it again, she reached her hand through the bars until her fingers found the lock. She pulled it back, so its end faced her. The dagger's point was much too big to pick the lock, so she would need something smaller. Her eyes searched around the cellar room. Sadly, the only thing was the sharp spindle on the spinning wheel, the very thing she told herself she wouldn't go near. Eventually, her determination to escape won her over. Being careful not to touch the sharp end, she broke off the entire piece with some help from the dagger. She whittled the wood down until she was certain it would fit into the keyhole. She silently thanked her father for teaching her woodworking and her mother for ensuring she knew how to get out of sticky situations. Once she was finished, she stuck the dagger back in her boot, and she snapped the spindle in two. Steadily she held the two pieces in one hand and the lock in the other. Soon the lock snapped open. She removed it and lifted the latch. Quietly she opened the barred door. She tossed the spindle pieces away, worried the curse might take effect even if it wasn't a spindle anymore. She didn't want the pieces near her more than what was needed. She figured a splinter would trigger a curse just as well as a prick. Then she made her way out of the dungeons, getting at her dagger again. To her surprise, there was no one guarding her. There wasn't even anyone present once she reached the other parts of the small castle. Life there was empty. That wasn't the case outside the castle walls, however. When she arrived at a bridge leading outside, she saw the dragons flying around. Escape became a little more complicated after that. Instead of going across the bridge, she chose another way. She thought perhaps there were some underground tunnels or passages. She went back to the dungeons in search of a tunnel. Sure enough, she found one, but a path of murky water ran through the tunnel as well. She made no second thoughts as she went inside the tunnel. Escape was critical. Making her way along the damp path, she held her dagger tightly. The tunnel echoed as water dripped from the ceiling and she stepped into the puddles. Then in front of her, she heard someone else's footsteps. She stopped walking to make sure it wasn't her own. The steps continued even when she stood still. She wasn't alone. However, she knew she had to keep making her way forward. Perhaps she could surprise the person coming her way and then run. The steps neared her more so, but she had just reached a corner. She decided it was best to stay and wait for the person. Luckily down there were many dark places to hide as well as the option of going into the dark water. She held her breath as the footsteps approached. Carefully she watched the other side of the wall where a shadow appeared. Finally, when she saw their foot make an appearance, she came out, holding the dagger only to be greeted with a sword. Its blade was the only thing she could look at. Then the person put their sword away and said, "Paige." They brought her into their arms even though she still had the dagger in her hands. She may not have seen their face, but she knew their voice, Turner's voice. He pulled her away from him after the quick embrace and asked, "How did you get out?" "I came all this way to save you." She smiled, "Well, I still need saving, mind you. No one is inside, but the dragons are everywhere outside." "How did you get in here without being caught?" "Sneaking and lots of patience. I was going to come here with an army of knights, but my father said it wasn't any of our business." "Do you know why the dragons brought you here?" he asked, taking her hand that wasn't holding the dagger. They started to make their way out of the tunnel. It was on the command of some fairy. Apparently, she thought I was a princess. This surprised him. What princess? Something about a princess with a curse. And then how her people call her Princess Beauty. Are you talking about the one I'm engaged to? Turner exclaimed while stopping abruptly. Now that Paige thought about it, what Turner had told her did fit what Fashion said. I guess that princess, but weren't you supposed to meet her today? It wouldn't make any sense to go to her castle if she wasn't there, right? They started moving forward again. Turner's mind was spinning in circles. He felt bad for wishing what he heard to be true. If it was, then it meant she was the girl he was going to marry. It would solve that problem, but how awful would his father feel if Paige was the princess? Then his father would have denied his son from saving the one girl he wanted Turner to wed. There's the exit, Turner said. They slowed, but the dark water next to them went straight off a cliff where it fell somewhere far below. Paige put her dagger away, knowing there wouldn't be a need for it. Then she asked, "Where's your Pegasus?" Probably found himself somewhere else to hide. I'm going to have to whistle. Hopefully, no dragons are nearby. Turner put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled for the Pegasus. Within a matter of minutes, the trusty steed came to their aid. They backed up so the Pegasus had room to land. Then Turner got on and extended his hand out to Paige. "Let's get you home," he said. She took his hand and got on the Pegasus. Her arms went around his waist as they took off, safely away from the castle full of dragons. It was much easier than they expected, but that was only because Fashion wanted to see where this little adventure went. She had let them escape. Plus she had her doubts that Paige was the princess after witnessing Paige whittle down the spindle so carelessly.